Very good. So I think I drew the short straw, so I get to go first. Maybe just to introduce a little bit more about VMware. It's not quite the household word yet, but we happen to be the fifth largest software company in the world at this point, at a little bit over $5 billion in revenue. If you access a cloud, right, a service or an internet service, the likelihood is our software sits behind it. So, we build this software called virtualization software that, magically creates these dynamic cloud environments amongst other things. Our market cap, as of a few seconds ago, was $45 billion. So we're a nice big company. We were born out of Stanford. All of our founders were from Stanford University here. Our campus is actually leased from Stanford, right? We just invested $500 million in building out our campus here about 2 miles away from here. So we're investing heavily in California. We're hiring in US and California extensively. Obviously, we have certain things we'd like to see improved, but we continue to grow and invest here substantially because of the extraordinary innovative environment that we're in. We do think of the technology industry, particularly here in the Bay Area, as just an extraordinary opportunity for continued growth and innovation. But we also see that the period we're in is probably one of the most disruptive, radical periods of transformation in the history of the IT industry. An analogy I've recently used was tectonic shifts that we're now entering into as we move from the era of client-server computing to mobile cloud computing. Almost exactly 25 years ago, Digital Equipment Corporation was the second largest technology company in the world, was expected to be disrupting IBM to pass it to become #1, second largest employer in technology, valuation, et cetera. And Ken Olsen famously made a statement that PCs are toys and they will never have relevance in enterprise. 9 years ago, he was purchased by a toy company named Compaq. And we see this period that we're in right now, right, as we see these forces of social, mobile, cloud, big analytic data to be a radically disrupted period of the industry as well. And if you want to have one single word that describes the transitions in the high-tech industry today, I'll teach you a new word today, SOMO-CLOBAD. You got it? So, SOMO-CLOBAD, social, mobile, cloud, and big data. Right, it's a single summary of all these disruptive effects that are going on in the industry. And we think the things that we've seen, like BlackBerry, Nokia, Dell going private, et cetera, are the minor tremors before the real earthquakes start to occur that will be more significant than the shifts that happened 25 years ago with Digital Equipment Corporation. In this era of client-server to mobile cloud, right, we see that it is a period for radical shifts in valuation, startups emerging, and all of the the energies around them. Many of them are centered here in the Valley. Obviously, there are many things that we look for from policy and economy, and our views in VMware are not that different from other high-tech companies. Clearly, things like patent reform concern us substantially. Tax reform, the highest corporate tax rate in the world makes us very concerned and causes, very, very unusual business structures just to yield good returns and to be globally competitive. I think the single largest effect on the high-tech IT industry when we look back 10 years from now of 2013 will be Snowden. And that alone has reset a global expectation in the high-tech industry. And it's not just a government policy, right? It really is how the high-tech industry overall is viewed on a global basis. As I mentioned, we are deeply invested here in California. Just finishing our campus, we're going to have a big ribbon-cutting ceremony, 100 acres, the largest campus in the area here that we're just finishing building out in it. But we continue to be concerned about California competitiveness. And I just made a $1.5 billion acquisition of a company called AirWatch that was housed in Atlanta. And obviously, there are numerous decisions and factors that go into where you acquire companies and those decisions. But the fact that it was not in California was on the positive side, right, of that equation for our decision of where they were housed. as we look at other areas, deeply invested in education and STEM development. We hire the best and the brightest of engineers, and that's what we're concerned about. And that begins very early and needs to be carried through our educational system. Things like R&D tax credits and the like are just the fundamental lifeblood, right, of what we do here in Silicon Valley and what we do as an industry. With respect to the economy, I'd say it's cloudy with bumps on the horizon. As much as as a company, we grew 17% last year. This year, we've guided to 16% growth. We expect that we continue to be a strong growth company, but it's a very rocky environment. Different countries with substantially different growth rates, turbulence in many areas of the marketplace, and that's against this backdrop of this highly tectonic shift environment of the high-tech industry as well. So job creation and companies collapsing in the process will create a very, very uncertain environment overall as we look to the future. All of that said, obviously, there's no better place or no better industry in the world to be participating in than the high tech, and VMware is honored to join the stage with my dear friend Shantanu today.
Okay, thanks, Pat. And while Pat said he drew the short straw, he didn't tell me what he was going to talk about. And being in the same industry, now I've got to completely change my opening remarks because I was going to talk about social and mobile and cloud. But in all seriousness, I think we share a lot of views in common. A little bit about Adobe. I think most of you hopefully know Adobe. We are one of the companies that distributes more software than anybody else in the world. And one of the things that everybody does tell me is when you're being asked to update your reader, is that okay? It is okay. Trust us on that one. But the company was founded as well. It's a Silicon Valley success story. As John mentioned, Chuck Geschke and John Warnock had this idea for being able to basically print what you could see on the screen, and desktop publishing would not have happened without Adobe. Every magazine, every newspaper, the video that you see on a web probably had a piece of Adobe software that was used to create that software. And our mission has continued to be the same. We want to change the world through digital experiences. And like Pat said, in the 30 years that I've been in technology, we haven't seen as many tectonic shifts. And we use the same word as we've seen all happening at the same time. The move to mobile, the move to cloud, and the move towards social. And so I'm an optimist. I know we'll talk about tax reform, and we'll talk about regulation, and we'll talk about macroeconomic conditions. But I just fundamentally believe that the Valley is all about innovation. I think 4 years ago, people were prematurely talking about the demise of the Valley, and I think we've completely reinvented itself. So I think if there are two things I'd like to touch on, it's ideas and talent. And innovation is the lifeblood of everything that we do. We like to say that we're going to kill our own products if we can get better innovation to happen. And I think when we think about ideas, when we think about innovation, unfortunately, far too often, the Valley thinks about how do we work around what is happening with respect to government policies rather than working with. And one of the things that I think really is an issue right now for us, again, as Pat alluded to, is the whole patent issue, because we're a company that focuses on innovation in order to protect that innovation, and in order to be able to monetize that innovation is an absolutely crucial thing. So when we think of ideas, there's no dearth of ideas, but I do think there's a dearth right now of the right policies that enables people to capitalize on it. And perhaps the second thing I'll touch on a little bit is what goes with ideas is talent. And I think that's where, whether it's Stanford or whether it's the other schools in the Bay Area, it's so critical. I mean, we just have to continue to invest in talent, and we have to make sure that the people that we invest in and give higher degrees to, that we find a way to capitalize on their talents by keeping them. And I think we didn't touch on immigration reform, but that's another thing that when we think about what's important to continue to drive the economy, if you have ideas and if you have the talent, I think that's going to be really key. I'll maybe change Pat's comment on STEM a little bit. Pat talks about STEM correctly. We like to talk about STEAM. because we like to add the arts as well in order to, we think math is important, we think science is crucial, but we also think art is just as important. And we like to believe that we're one of the companies at the confluence of art and science, because if you can create something and you can understand how people using it, I think that's really key to what we are doing. So, but as I said earlier, we think that our opportunity has never been better. When you see what's happening with respect to technology changes and the ability to really innovate at a much more rapid pace and to deploy that all around the world, I think it's all about how we as companies innovate and take market share away, even if in the macroeconomic situation the market's not growing.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Well, I did. STEAM is good. I like that. So, right. But given you do graphics and publishing, I can understand the A in there. But yeah, let's stick with STEM. Right?
You both. There's an integration between what the two of you said that I want to pursue. You've said you wanted the best and the brightest engineers, and you said that you're all about the talent. And that's true even outside of Silicon Valley. Every company is all about the people and all about the talent. Where are and I don't mean are they from Stanford or Berkeley, I mean, where in the world are the best and the brightest engineers now?
Well, I still continue to think that the U.S. is for higher education, as an immigrant to this country, I can easily say this is the best place on the planet even now. The problem, I think, is we're not attracting as many people as we used to attract for higher education. And so we go where the talent is. I mean, we have offices now in Basel and Hamburg and Bucharest and Beijing and Noida and Bangalore. And so while we will go where the talent is, I continue to think that as a country and as an economy, we have to invest more in attracting a lot of that talent here. But for a pure quality of higher education, this is by far still the best place in the world.
Yeah, and I would echo that. This is unquestionably the best, particularly for the innovative research kind of work that we do. We see that gap being closed. Right, we see, India, China, Russia. We have a large operation in Bulgaria. The gap is being closed, but unquestionably, this is the best. And if we bridge into one of the comments on policy, I always have found it just to be absolutely perplexing that we, have people come here, get educated in the finest universities on the planet, and then we force them to go back. Right, because we don't have immigration policy. Can you believe that? And we probably even subsidized a huge portion of their educational costs while they were here with our taxpayers' dollars, and then we forced them to go home. And, it just seems so perplexing that that's what our policies would indicate to be. And clearly, that's been a case where it's been questionably an enormous benefit to our economy, as so many of the startups have been driven by foreign nationals who've come here, been educated, and stayed. Right? These are the best and brightest in the world, and that's what our economy lives on, and that's what our industry lives on.
Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think we're completely aligned on that point.
Yeah, I think if you poke a hole in any thoughtful businessman in this country today, this issue comes up over and over again. That it's
and it's just been persistently there, right? I mean, the business view of this hasn't changed for at least 20 years. Just.
I'm surprised about one thing that you say, and it just shows that I've been wrong all this time, and that is that the Chinese annually produce so many more engineers than we do, and I'm frankly, I guess, surprised to hear that the best and the brightest are still here, even though we're a smaller and smaller percentage of the engineering.
Yeah, we see that gap closing, right? They are doing better. They're investing very heavily in their top tier research universities, both in terms of number, right, as well as quality. But unquestionably, the best research is done here in the U.S., and the best educational system is still here in the U.S. Obviously, there's quality institutions on a global basis in a mature Europe, but this is the top of the heap.
The thing I might add is, it's not just the quality of the skill set that's available. I think what's very unique about the Valley is it's that skill set associated with the venture capital industry, which allows so much venture creation that is clearly unparalleled anywhere else, and an acceptance of failure. In fact, failure is not something that people hold against you. It's a badge of honor if you work in startups. And I think it's the combination of that talent and the capital, access to capital, and role models. I think every one of us in the room probably has a role model of a company that's been very successful, which fuels even more innovation. And I think that's just something. People have been trying to replicate that all around the world with not as much success as we've seen in the Valley.
This is, by the way, this is not pre-scripted. They asked me, out of curiosity, what was the first question I was going to ask, and I haven't gotten to it yet. So I'll go there. What is your thinking, segueing from the last session, on business in Russia and business in China?
Yeah, business in Russia, very turbulent. You know, we'll have great quarters, we'll have terrible quarters, very unpredictable. We have minimal operations there. EMC, right, obviously 80% shareholder of VMware, is participating in Skolkovo, a R&D center in Moscow, but you know, very turbulent environment, and I expect that to become substantially worse given the current geopolitical situations. You know, China, on the other hand, is actually reasonably predictable. And we've had good sustained business growth there, good sustained R&D expansion and partner expansion there. However, you know, we have very differentiated products, and with that, businesses like you know, Cisco's or HP's business in China has just plummeted, right, based on largely nationalistic motivations. And as such, we're seeing in many of the cloud companies as well, Tencent, Alibaba, the big China mobile companies, HTC, ZTE, et cetera, you know, clearly emerging as much more dominant effects globally, you know, with Huawei as the biggest at the front of that heap. So, you know, and this bridges to my Snowden comments. I think that just gave fuel to increasing nationalism, right, to countries around the world, and I expect that to be a large, you know, impetus behind continuing to do business in places like China to become more challenging over time as a direct result.
Well, the short answer for us is market share is great in both those countries and revenue is terrible. And the reason for that is Adobe's in two businesses. You know, when we distribute our software, everybody uses our software in all these emerging markets. So, you know, whether it's Photoshop or whether it's PDF and Acrobat, they're household names. The problem is it's all pirated in a lot of these countries. And so when you think about the fact that in, you know, some emerging markets, if you're selling the same number of PCs as you're selling in the US, and our revenue is a fraction of it. And so, but we're changing as we move to the cloud and as we require, you know, access to the cloud as being the way in which people access software, we'll address it. But today, revenue is really pretty poor. Sometimes we sell more books about how to use our software, you know, than actually make in terms of the software revenue.
Yeah.
And on the other side, I think what's happening is we're in the big data, you know, with our digital marketing cloud, we process 10 trillion transactions now. And so we're helping people collect data. And I think some of these countries, and China is one of them, has very strict laws of what servers can be run in those countries. And I think a lot of technology companies that are in the data and analytics space, the servers are more in Hong Kong and other places. And so I think it's evolving. But if those countries want to promote indigenous industries in these two areas that I think all of them would acknowledge is really important, software, virtualization, hardware, they will have to realize that they have to recognize intellectual property more than they do today.
But I think it only becomes in their best interest to do that, right, when there's some global balance return, because the size of their industries, and certainly in the software area, are still, you know, minuscule in terms of the economic benefit they're getting by piracy on the other hand. Right, and until those start to come into more, I'll say, economic balance for their local industries versus global, you know, they'll have the, you know, the occasional, I have to go demonstrate action in this, in this regard, right? But not going to fundamentally change their policies in this regard, and it will take a long time until the intellectual property domains, patent systems, et cetera, you know, mature to the degree that they are in the United States.
How much, if any, energy do you each put into in corporate governance on the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act? How important is that?
Well, I think it's very important. It's table stakes for us in our business. You know, wherever we do business in the world, we're fortunate in that we have, always ranked one of the top 10 ethical companies in the world to do business with. And it's just one of those non-negotiable things that we do. And so, we do all the requisite training. But I don't think we would have any, the one sure way of getting fired at Adobe is to do something that's unethical. And so, I mean, it's a way of business, and we will pass on business if we have to do anything that's even remotely unethical.
Other than ditto, what do you have to?
Yeah, similar. The problem for us is often that we can do it very well ourselves, right? And we do have great practices, but we have to, 85% of our business goes through a channel partner, right? Internationally, that's well over 90%.
Right.
So that means not only do we have to operate, ethically and with the highest, but we have to govern our channel partners, which may be, two tiers of distribution away, and that becomes just an ongoing challenge. Where, what does Fred do in a certain country in Africa, right, with respect to certain nations in other parts of the Middle East or Asia? So those things become quite challenging to monitor. So it requires a tremendous amount of diligence in your practices, not just in your own employees, but how you execute that through the entire distribution channel. And those things get to be harder as you become more distributed in a larger company.
The interesting thing, Pat, for us is that it's actually changing. The barbell right now, we were like you, very much a two-tier distribution through channel partners. As we're going more direct with our online presence, we understand who the customer is, and as we're going more direct for the larger deals, it's again Adobe feet on the street.
It becomes an easier thing
exactly.
for you,
It becomes
for you
an
to
easier
monitor.
thing, exactly, at
Yeah,
the
since
two ends of the spectrum.
since my revenue is still 90% of distributed software versus online software,
Right.
we have still many more of those challenges.
You've twice alluded now to Snowden. Can you, to the extent you want to, can you expand a little bit for those of us in the audience that aren't as familiar with how it's affecting your business?
Well, obviously in this mobile cloud world, there is an enormous expectation of U.S. technologies participating in establishing the mobile cloud environments on an international basis. We have the leading cloud companies, the leading search companies, the leading mobile companies. They're all here, right? And now when we go internationally, right now the questions, right, that were always there before with respect to backdoors and with respect to governance policies and with respect to security and privacy questions have been raised to a much, much higher degree. And I think no matter how you look at it, that's going to hurt U.S. companies. Right, because whether it's the China comments before of legitimacy to accelerate the investments into indigenous technologies, whether it's acceleration of building up their own cloud technologies, preventing international search companies to participate there, that list goes on, and it's legitimized a set of actions on the part of countries to look at that with a higher bar. Clearly from our business, we are doing well in light of that, and the way our products are architected, we think that we can do better than most. But the bar for us doing business and continuing to be the unquestioned technology leaders, right? Not just VMware, but the entire high-tech industry now has a higher bar of leadership demanded upon it against these policies. And we believe that there are challenges not just for NSA to reestablish its credibility globally, but also for companies, right, to continue to be able to individually and collectively be able to present our policies in this regard, right, on a global basis, that yes, indeed, you can trust our products, you can trust our privacy, our governance, the security practices that we are operating by internally. And as I said, I think for 2013, this will have the greatest long-term effects on the high-tech industry of the United States.
Well, I'll say maybe a couple of things on it. The first is one of the unfortunate consequences of something like this might be, Silicon Valley and I think all of tech has been driven by collaborative cultures. And collaborative cultures, even within the company, has been driven by how to get people access to information. Rather than believing that information access should be curtailed, we believe in the product teams getting more access to information to innovate. And now as we worry about, breaches, you're going to put up more walls within the company to protect your information. And I think that is one of the consequences. In another way, I think what's happening for us is, as we collect data on behalf of our customers, more and more people are asking us, for how can we protect PDFs in the environment, and so it actually potentially represents a business opportunity as well.
Right. That's an interesting angle. Affordable health care, how does it affect your businesses?
Only modestly. I mean, our general policies with regard to the health care that we were providing to our employees were already so far above those bars, right, that for the most part, it doesn't make effect. And I really see those impacts being, largely to smaller, much smaller companies that were much closer to the bar of needing to, put those policies in place. But, come and join VMware. We have much better health policies than that by far.
I'll keep that in mind. I'll keep that in mind if I decide to be unretired.
No, I would say the same. And I think, as Pat mentioned earlier, I mean, the things that impact us are the R&D tax credit. We sort of, it starts, it stops. That's one thing that, we invest in innovation. Tax reform. I think that's the other thing that we would both probably say. A lot of us as software companies and as tech companies, we have so much money offshore. And if we're waiting for comprehensive tax reform, the more money we get back into this country, the more we're going to invest in research and development. We're one of the highest in terms of the percentage of sales that we invest. So I think those are the government policies. We talked about patent reform and we talked about immigration. I think given our lens on technology, those are probably the policy issues that have more impact on us.
Yeah, those would be the ones that clearly affect us the most day to day in our activities.
Okay. And I'm going to try to do as good a job as Condi did on calling from the audience. She's raised the bar. There are the questions from the audience. Now you all do have a speaking part. I take that back. John, did you? John Chauvin?
Go, John. So as CEOs of public technology companies, in an age of quite a bit of activism in terms of shareholders, I wanted to ask whether you're being forced to think about short-run use of cash issues at the expense of long-run investment and growth issues.
Well, I think macro, big picture, first thing I would say is that all public companies, we're being required even more than we have in the past to ensure that shareholder issues are being addressed, and in addition to the corporate strategic issues that we worry about. And I think there are multiple people who get this label of activists, and I think they're very different. And so grouping all of them in one bucket, I think, is actually very dangerous. We have somebody who represents the shareholders on our board, and I would say the process has actually been very good in terms of the value add and thinking about whether it's return on invested capital, whether it's thinking about uses of cash as a mechanism of driving both the short term as well as the long term. But I would say for the most part, the kinds of board members and investors that we want, we have to understand the balance between short term and long term. But it is something that I think is more of a reality, not just traditionally that was with other industries, and now virtually every tech company will have to think about it more.
And we at VMware, we're as a growth cycle that we're in, we're still doing major acquisitions. So generally those issues haven't been as harsh for us directly. EMC, our parent company, they put in a dividend policy a year and a half ago. We've stepped up our share buyback for return to shareholder equity value. So those things I think have affected all companies, just to look at those, and most of those have been pretty good. Right? They haven't been bad steps for companies to be asked, how are you giving return to the shareholders, right? And if you're looking at these large cash holds that you're sitting onto and you haven't demonstrated the track record of using it for acquisitions or other capital investments, what are you using it for, right? And in that respect, those aren't bad questions to see being asked. And to some degree, I'd say it's the responsibility of all board members to be asking those questions. What is the right company strategy and use of capital on behalf of the shareholders? That is the board members' responsibilities to ask those questions.
Questions? Over here. 2 microphones are converging on you.
Thank you. When we talk about ideas and talent, Christian Lagarde and the IMF are suggesting that if women's labor rates equaled men's labor rates around the world, the GDP of the world would go up in double digits, and even 5% here in this country. And we're also looking at this incredible trend in education, where now close to 60% of college graduates are women, not only in this country, but around the world. But the STEM industry lags behind in terms of capitalizing on these trends and opportunities. So I wondered if we could get your thoughts on what the industry can do about that.
Yeah, it's been a persistent issue for the high-tech and IT-related industries. And I was at Intel for 30 years. Right, we struggled with this. EMC, we struggled with it. And now VMware, I get to look at it yet again. So, and I always ask, well, what's the population? And we used to do surveys of other companies, and we say, they all suck, right? And it's just, it's just been this frustrating, persistent issue. When, obviously some of the steps like Anita Borg Institutes and some of the other efforts in those regards have clearly raised this awareness. But it has been just a persistent issue. We launched our VM Women initiative last year to start addressing this more directly, to be more aggressive with regard to moving upstream into universities and grants and programs into those both domestically as well as internationally. But generally the problem is that generally STEM, right, the population going into STEM, right, has never been, for females, has never been, right, nearly as high as males, right? It's not been seen as attractive going into it early, and there's been persistently a larger fallout rate of people starting in engineering and ending up in marketing or sales or some other related but not core activity. And this is a long-term persistent issue, and one that I think collectively as an industry we need to continue to put more investment and more drive into addressing, because as you say, right, just from any aspect of diversity, creativity, et cetera, having a more diverse workforce is unquestionably part of what makes us as an industry and that innovation cycle powerful.
Pat talked about the pipeline. I'll add a couple of other things. First is at Adobe, we're very clear. We just want to make this a competitive differentiation for us vis-a-vis all the other tech companies. And so we have more role models in the company, principal scientists who are women. And if we can use that to hire a disproportionate share, we think we'll be better off as a company. And I think that's borne out. There are a couple of other things that I think we are doing as a company to help promote that. We have this program called Adobe Youth Voices, and Adobe Youth Voices is all about digital literacy for people who don't have access to technology. And just recently, there's a new movement called Girls Who Code, who are coming in and making their round in Silicon Valley. And that's, I think, great to see, because if we can create these role models at every level, Pat's right about it going all the way down to K through 8. But we're saying for the people who are graduating, for the people who are taking computer science as well as the other technical disciplines as their major, let's get our disproportionate share of them, because we think it'll help us.
While he's getting the microphone, I'll just add, having been on Wall Street and having dealt with this issue on Wall Street, the same issue, it's frustrating because it's a journey, and there's been progress. No matter what start date you choose, there's been progress, but it's not fast enough. It's not going fast enough for the people who feel they're being discriminated against. It's not going fast enough for the managers who want the best talent. But there is progress, and that's the yin and the yang of that issue. And it's not only, women is an extraordinarily important part of that, and so are other issues in the whole diversity movement. But it's a journey, and it's very frustrating for senior management and for people who are trying to climb.
Yes, I picked up on your comment about the Atlanta company, and that was a plus for you. Can you expand as much as you can on your location analysis and what goes on in your mind about the attitude of California toward businesses and the continued tax increases, et cetera? Mm-hmm. Businesses in Silicon Valley and everywhere say, if they raise these taxes, we're all going to leave. And Sacramento says, no, you're not. and then they raise the taxes, and we all have a boom cycle again. So we don't leave. So yeah, a little bit about your perspective on location analysis and really the relationship with Sacramento.
Yeah, and you know, as I said, you know, we're highly invested in California. You know, we built out a campus. We have almost 7,000 employees here now. You know, we're going to continue to add to that. So, you know, I say this as somebody who's invested here. I say it as somebody who's continuing to expand our headcount here. We definitely see this as the the hub of our creative, innovative engine. You know, that said, right, tax rates are, higher here than any state in the nation. At that point, policies with regard to innovation, right, are very challenging here. Anybody who, has a large portfolio, I'm, headed close to 6,000 engineers, 17,000 people by the end of this year in the company. I have to look at other portfolios of sites, right, to continue to be economic and competitive. And if I can, put 1.5 engineers in Atlanta, or 3 engineers in India, or 4 engineers in Bulgaria, right, for the same dollars, I have to look at that for the different aspects of our portfolio of assignments. So we may have the most creative things here, but support staff, right, other things that tend to, right, be less at that very peak of innovation, I'm forced to look at them other ways just to stay competitive and just to maximize our position in products in the industry. That's our job as CEOs, right, is to make sure we're delivering the maximum return for our customers and shareholders. So I find it very, discouraging in that respect, that the only answer is raising taxes and, increasing regulation. A good friend of mine, Ted Gaines, who's assemblyman in the California Congress, and he's about to release a book called Kaboom, California CA Boom, and really brings great analogies from the gold rush, right, that entrepreneurial spirit of California was born in that time period, right, and just as wonderful analogies that he brings out in the book from that heritage. And now with the taxes, the regulatory environments, the cost, and infrastructure shortcomings that are in the state. I mean, I just had a great business meeting with a good business partner from Japan yesterday. He said, this infrastructure that you have here is worse than we had in Japan 10 years ago, right, with broadband and cell phone networks and so on. It's just, this is just not a good place to do business from that perspective, even if it is the pinnacle of innovation.
I think people-wise, we would all say our biggest fear right now is losing people, and the Valley is still, the best place for talent. So all the mission-critical stuff, to add to what Pat said, we do here. But we created a new data center, and we moved the data center to Oregon because there was a more tax-friendly environment there. And as Pat said, if it's not super critical, then we look at other places. But we're still looking for engineers here, and there is a dearth of talent in the Bay Area.
Here. Yes, John, he's got it.
You were kind of joking about selling more instruction books and software. Why do you stay in these emerging countries where people are stealing your software? Do you basically expect that technology will move ahead in the future so that you can get rid of the problem?
Well, the first thing I should probably mention is that there's piracy that happens all across the world. So it's not just restricted to the emerging markets. It's certainly more pronounced in emerging markets, but there is technology piracy that happens in every market. And, I think we have the best opportunity that we've ever had as a company as we deliver this software through the cloud to ensure that we're being paid for the innovation that we're delivering, because unless you're a member of our Creative Cloud, you're not going to get access to the software. At the same time, we also do have a fundamental belief that as these markets mature, the investment that we're making in the people and the talent and the usage of our products, when those same people start businesses or when those same people start and work for multinationals, they are familiar with our products, they use our products, and then they pay for the products. So Maybe you can label it business development, as well. But I think it's inconceivable that we would walk away completely from that market, because these are important emerging markets. And we have to learn from them. And actually, it's a challenge for our engineers to figure out a way to how we can address the piracy issue.
And just to add to it, what is the second largest IT market in the world? China, right? It's now passed any of the European countries and now nominally equivalent to Japan, right? And is clearly the second, within, if not already, is clearly the second largest market. What's the second largest production of engineers today? China, right? And the capacity they've built out will have them as the #1 producer of engineering talent by number within the next few years. So it's inconceivable that a global high-tech company is not participating there at that level. So, you have to participate. And as Shantanu said, you better adjust your business model to that market, just like you have to adjust to other markets, right? India has its unique characteristics. Russia has unique characteristics. And that's part of what we have to do, is determine how to best participate in those markets. And, clearly as we do so, good international policies and other things like that, are just elements of what's required, right? But as businesses, we have to live inside of the laws and environment that we're given and do the best job inside of it.
I'm going to ask slightly technical question. It addressed to both of you. You talked about the technology and moving in the direction of mobile and cloud and Internet of Things and all those great things that are happening in the Valley and the rest of the country. And my question is twofold. One, how are you making the migration from on-premise to the cloud easy enough and user-friendly enough to the people who are not sophisticated? That's one. Second thing is, I'm not talking about security in the cloud, but how do you make sure that I put something in the cloud, I can trust the cloud? Is that when I mean trust, it is I want to make sure that even somebody who is operating the cloud is not able to hack it. Thank you.
Well, I think to the two questions that you asked, Kumar, the first one, without a doubt, is when we think about market expansion and we think about the cloud as a great way for market expansion, design and aesthetics and ease of use is the thing that we worry about the most. Because in order to really tap into the hundreds of millions of people whom we think are an available market opportunity for us, it's directly correlated to how easy we make it for them to have access to software. I mean, going back to the previous question as well, one of the things that's helped us drive innovation in these emerging markets is the fact that they have a different propensity to pay. We've had to find a way to charge different prices. And again, the cloud allows us to do that, whereas if we had desktop boxes, people would just buy the box in one country and ship it to another country. So I think your point's well taken on the first one, which is ease of use, and we think about that all the time in terms of how easy is our software to use, because that is certainly going to dramatically open up the markets that we have available for us. I think with respect to your second question on the technical side associated with security, it's a game of cat and mouse. I mean, the reality is we are all trying to protect the information that we collect on behalf of our customers. As you get best practices, there's somebody who's trying to stay a step ahead of you. And it's going to be this constant battle to make sure that whatever we provide is secure and the information is private. I think, as you know, it's actually spawned an entire industry of what we call white knights, who are people that we hire to help us break our code so that we can actually, when they break the code, fix it before the bad guys get it. And so I think it's a business opportunity as well.
Yeah, and just a couple of comments to add to that. Fundamentally, as we move, as I described, this tectonic shift from the client server to the mobile cloud era, fundamentally, it is an easier to use technology set, right? The mobile device is easier to use than the PC. That's part of its characteristics. Cloud services are easier to get, build, and deploy, right? They're fundamentally, you move capital to operational costs. They're fundamentally dynamic. They're fundamentally global and scalable by their nature. That's part of what's driving this fundamental shift to from client server to mobile cloud. And that's part of this, compelling period that's creating this tectonic shift to the industry. With regard to the security and privacy aspects, the cousins of each other in that domain, as Shantanu said, it's a game of cat and mouse, right? We come up with new technologies, they're challenged. Technologies are largely neutral. They can be used by the good guys and the bad guys along the way. And thus our job is always to innovate the new creative positive uses, and then the bad guys go figure out new bad ones, and then we come up with new good ones along the way. We just released a new technology, we call it in the virtual security and networking domain at the RSA conference last 2 weeks ago, I believe. We called it the Goldilocks zone, right, where applications don't have infrastructure awareness. Infrastructure doesn't have application awareness, but this whole concept of cloud and virtualization sits right in the middle. So not too hot, not too cold, just right. Right, so we're releasing some new technologies to address exactly that area of being able to enhance the technologies available for trust, for privacy, for localization and governance. And our overall cloud strategy is what we call a globally local strategy, allowing the full operation of all of those cloud services within national borders and within companies' private data centers for all of those types of reasons. But it's an area, we'll be in this race forever. The only thing that's growing faster than security spending is security threats.
The nice thing about all of this conversation, though, I must say, is that previous economic conversations, when we were talking about cloud, people thought we were talking about global warming, and now we're talking about technology. And so I think we've come a long way.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good one-liner. I like that one. I'll steal that one. Okay.
Questions? What's the biggest challenge that you each face that we haven't touched on?
Shantanu, I think, and maybe coming back a little bit, the talent challenge is always a persistent one, and I think that deserves just a few more comments. Clearly, we compete for it aggressively here in the Valley, but that is also a key driver of why we pursue international footprint as well, right? Is to find talent, retain talent, and be able to mature and grow it as well. And some of these comments like R&D investments, government investments in research, that's the seed corn, right, to create that very talent that we're looking at. And we can look to the glory days of DARPA and internet and so on as just some of those great things, and why we're so passionate about some of those R&D investments and STEM investments, because that's the seed corn that we need today to create the VMwares, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Adobes of tomorrow. And none of us are so Pollyanna to believe that we can take an action today and solve this problem tomorrow. Right, but we are passionate about collectively as an industry creating that continuing cycle of talent that allows us to stay in the front of the world innovation cycle. Because this whole area of mobile cloud, as we've described it, we've barely begun the beginning of this cycle. We're in an industry cycle that's going to last for 25 plus years of innovation, that's going to change every aspect of transportation, every aspect of the medical industry, every aspect of the financial industry, every aspect of communications. We're just getting started in a very, very powerful technology cycle. So this is going to be a fun couple, 3 decades in front of us, and talent will be the winner, the determinant of the winners and losers.
I'm worried about all the startups my friend Jim Breyer here in the audience is investing in, that are out there with no existing business model and they are going to disrupt. I mean, it's such an amazing time for new venture creation. And so I think, do we have that sense of urgency around, continuing to stay ahead and innovate is something that we worry about. I think you would probably also agree, Pat, focus. I mean, I think we also see such tremendous opportunity right now with what's happening with technology in the entire world. We've actually changed our strategy from where a few years ago, if we were saturated and we thought about emerging markets as our largest opportunity, Now we look at so much opportunity available in developed countries with all of these moves that we have actually shifted our focus back. And so focus, I think, is an area of, are we really clearly aligned in a company as we get to be the size we both are? You know, that continues to be a challenge for us.
I mean, focus in any one company is a critical piece of management. I'm a little discouraged to hear you think this wave of innovation only has another 25 or so years to run.
Well, I think the one that we're entering now in mobile cloud,
Okay.
right? You know, these are 25-year kind of cycles, right? You know, and I'm not sure what the one after that is, right? Yet, but you know, social, mobile, cloud, and in particular, big data, right? And how they're going to have implications on what we do. Tonight, you're going to go to sleep, right? Tomorrow morning, right? You're going to be woken up by your cell phone that's going to wake you up an hour early, telling you that you had a heart irregularity last night. It's already scheduled your doctor's appointment for you. It loaded the new routing into your car. It initiated the DNA sequence. The results are going to be at the doctor against the world database before you get there, and a set of recommendations on you know, potential prescriptions and courses that he's going to follow are already going to be given to him, right? As a result, by the time you arrive there, and you've already ordered your favorite latte at the most convenient Starbucks on the way, right? And you know, of course, that will all be loaded into your Tesla or whatever you're driving these days to get there on time.
John Lipsky's over there saying this sounds like we're going to be superfluous.
I fundamentally don't believe that by any means, right? But I do think that the next couple of decades of innovation, right? You know, we're entering a very powerful cycle, and you know, there's going to be wild disruptions along the way. There's going to be companies like DEC that are just going to cease from existence, that probably employ 50 or 100 or 150,000 people today, right? So it's not going to be without enormous shifts, right, along the way. But the period of innovation that's possible that we're entering here as we really reach in a global cloud environment, right, with this explosion of mobile devices, able to analyze data at scale like never before, this is a thrilling time.
It certainly is very exciting.
I concur. I mean, I think we wake up every morning thinking that the possibilities, and I think that's perhaps one of the key messages that we should leave. While you will see macroeconomic bumps along the way, if we think about the opportunity that technology companies have, because everything's getting disrupted. There isn't a single business that we know of today, whether you're in financial services, whether you're in retail, whether you're in travel, even whether you're in education, that probably isn't going to get disrupted over the next 15 or 20 years. And so this cycle of innovation is actually, I think, going to drive tremendous winners and tremendous losers, because there are going to be a whole bunch of people who are going to try and preserve the status quo, and that's just not going to work.
Right. No, absolutely. Other questions? It's actually never happened at a SIEPR Summit before that we were ahead of schedule.
You're 1 minute.
Okay. Really? I think we have 10. Oh, no, we're 10 minutes ahead of schedule. Okay. So any other questions? Is there a question in the back? Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a 3:10.
There's one there.
Question in the back?
Yeah, I'm a sophomore undergraduate at Stanford, and I would just like to ask a question that I find more relevant to the current system I'm in, which is our higher education system. And I just was wondering what qualities or focuses you think need to be maintained, adjusted, or added into our higher education or even entire education system in order to maintain international competitiveness in our human resources and to better prepare these human resources to take on the tectonic shifts that you were discussing before. Thank you.
Sure. I'll start.
Sure.
Yeah, and generally, I think as both Shantanu and I have commented, I think that the United States higher education system is at the front of the world in that regard. I believe you had Sal Khan here this morning. Right, I think that's creating the most disruptive set of changes in education in the world right now. And I think some of the implications, right, of that educational model where you're measuring and being able to drive true, competency and understanding before advancing to next levels of skills and learning, and being able to do that in different learning styles and techniques, as he's arguing, is extraordinarily disruptive. So, if I would have, one topic, I'd say, embrace, what that exactly means to education as we go forward. Clearly, the comments that both Shantanu and I have made around STEM education, right? It's just got to be in the basics of every aspect of what we're doing. Science, technology, engineering, math. These are the heart and soul, right, of our community. And I might even give a small deference to the arts. But this is the heart and soul, right, of the high-tech community. This is the heart and soul of innovation, and this is what is lusted for around the world about what we do here in the United States and in the Silicon Valley in particular. So we cannot lose that maniac focus of saying we will be excellent in those areas. And the continuing dismaying results that we have, right, in the K through 12 area in that regard, right, is simply astonishing. Right, simply astonishing. It's embarrassing as a nation that we can't do better at those levels. But that wasn't your question about higher ed, right? My bigger concerns are far more at the seeds that are going into our higher education system.
Thank you for asking that question. My son just graduated from Stanford, and he didn't ask me that question in 4 years. But two quick things that I might suggest. I think you have a unique opportunity. Internship programs and working while you're going to school in higher education, I think that's one of those opportunities that's very unique. I know both of us would love to hire more people from undergraduate institutions, so take advantage of the fact that you have in the Valley this unique ability to do internships while you're studying, because I think it allows you a much better perspective of what kind of business you want to be in and where your passion ultimately lies. The second thing, I think there's a unique opportunity for everybody in higher ed to get some kind of a global experience. And I think people who take advantage of that are just going to be better qualified and better capable of being in the real world, because we are in a global world. So those are two suggestions I might give you.
Be an intern and learn Chinese. Yep.
I think, a question over here.
I want to follow up on the previous two questions. It's all wonderful that women should be included in the STEM education. How about the large millions of seniors who are now really quite outside the realm of this galloping technology, and we are going to be more and more excluded? So I would like your suggestions how we may be we may get familiar with the technology, be more included, maybe not for employment, definitely for enjoyment. Thank you.
I think that's a good question. I don't know if people heard of this experiment that was run in India where there was just a computer that was put, and people behind the wall, kids were allowed to access that computing equipment. And the amount of learning that happened, completely self-help, was, I think, significantly higher than what was expected. So I think you're right in that. I think the younger generation just tends to look at this very differently than we do in terms of the learning. I think it does go back to one of the earlier questions as well, which is we have to, as a computing industry, make our technology easier to use and less onerous, or less, this sense of fear. And I think mobile allows us to do that. And I think if we can continue to do that, in this country, it's less access to the technology and it's more ease of use. And I think that's something that I know we as a company, we've shipped over 1 billion pieces of software, and we have to continue to do. But I think a lot of it relies in mobile being one of the easier ways for us to make it more, not just accessible, but easier to use.
Yeah, I'll just echo the same comments a bit. that this whole mobility, right, access to technology continues to diminish, and I think that's for all aspects, whether that's a 3-year-old, right, or a someone in the last phase of their journey of life. Our objective clearly is application awareness that becomes much, much easier in that regard. I was in a meeting this week, 30 people doing quarterly business reviews, and I get a Skype call from my mom. And everybody in the room is way excited, and she calls me from her iPad, right? So I opened her up and showed everybody on my staff my mom calling us on Skype, and it was almost unimaginable a couple of years ago, right? Because I tried to get her video conferencing on the PC, it was just impossible, right? And I mean, I'm a PC guy. I did 30 years of my life building this PC to be easier to use, right? It was just embarrassing. I couldn't get my mom to do video conferencing on it, but she Skypes me all the time now. So I think we're making progress in that regard, and quite looking forward to continuing to doing that. I think the Sal Khan comments as well, making education free and globally available. I mean, some of these things are really fabulous. I think that extends the whole spectrum of educational awareness across all aspects, and I think computer and technology learning is just one aspect of it. So, fabulous question.
I think we owe you a great debt of gratitude and a great thank you. It's a great session. Now, yes, I'll leave it at that. The only thing we didn't get any